Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope this finds you well. I am so tired, but happy to be here. Happy to be here. Yes, I am. Okay, so we got some things going on today, as you could tell by the comments and the description in the box. We are going to be talking about two cases, Alec Murdaugh first, and then we're going to go straight into the George Kelly case. Tomorrow we'll start, I think, the witnesses in the George Kelly case. So, first off, Alec Murdaugh. In the news again, y'all. Oh, why is it not popping up? Oh, come on, give me Alec Murdaugh. Okay. If you are in prison and you have a family member who is deceased, which is what's happened here, Alex Murdaugh's mother has passed away. He would get a call overhead announcing that Alec Murdaugh needs to see the chapel at the next movement change. That basically means that there are certain intervals during the day in which inmates can move from the cell to their place of where they work or different locations and everything. So Alec Murdaugh automatically probably knows by this point that somebody in his family has died. Most likely it was his mother, because his mother was very elderly and was on hospice care. So I'm going to read to you a little bit about what is known. Alec Murdaugh's mother, Elizabeth Jones Alexander Murdaugh, better known as Libby, she was married to Randolph Murdaugh III on June 3rd of 1961. And I'm going to have to have glasses, y'all. I'm trying. They were married. She was married to the legacy lawyer and solicitor for over 60 years. Libby Murdaugh is alive, but was alive, and she suffered from dementia. She played a small part in the Alec Murdaugh wife and son murder trial, in the sense that he went to her house after committing the murders. She, poor thing, she died Tuesday. I'm trying to pull it up. Oh, I hate all these little advertisements that pop up with. The Murdaugh family of Hampton County was most well-known family has passed away, leaving family, friends, community in mourning, but with her incarcerated son be able to attend her funeral. No. Elizabeth Libby Alexander Murdaugh, the wife of former 14th Circuit Court Solicitor Randolph Murdaugh III, the mother of the now notorious former attorney Richard Alec Murdaugh, has died at the age of 85 in her Hampton County home. People's Roldan Funeral Home in Hampton announced Wednesday that Libby Murdaugh passed away peacefully and surrounded by family and friends Tuesday afternoon, March 19th, at her home in Alameda, near Varnville, under hospice care. There's a picture of her. Let's see if I can share it. Was born February 26 of 1935 in Columbia, South Carolina, daughter of the late Milton Donald Alexander and the Nellie Jones Alexander. She graduated from Wade Hampton High in 1957, where she excelled in academics and athletics. It was here she began dating her future husband, the late Ralph Murdaugh III. Now, if you remember from the trial, Mr. Murdaugh passed away shortly after right after the death of Alec Murdaugh's wife and son. After graduation, she attended Columbia College, graduating in 1961 with a bachelor's degree in business administration. That summer, she married Randolph, with whom she celebrated 60 years of marriage shortly before his death in 2021. In the fall, she began teaching business classes. She served as a cheerleading coach, as well as taking many other extra responsibilities from before retirement in May of 2004. I think she was a teacher. She served in the Hampton School District Board from 2004 to 2019. The biggest loves were her family, grandchildren, friends from whom she was always making plans to gather and party. She was an ardent fan of the game. Oh my gosh. Gamecocks and enjoyed going to sporting events. I don't know why they have that name. She has left behind her daughter Lynn Murdaugh Allen, her son Randy Murdaugh the fourth, his wife Christy, Richard Alec Murdaugh, John Marvin Murdaugh and his wife Liz, grandchildren 1, 2, including the Buster Murdaugh. She had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 grandchildren, some sisters, and other special family members. The family is very grateful to the caregivers, keeping her comfortable. Funeral service will be held 12 o'clock noon, Tuesday, March 26th, my birthday, at the Varnville United Methodist Church. The burial will follow at the Hampton Cemetery. Services will be conducted by Reverend Jack Hutto and Reverend Jack Klopp. Visitation, ... Okay, so, very cute lady. I wish I could share this. I don't know if I can, but very, very, very sweet looking lady. She had no idea the role she played in the murder trial, and I really felt bad. I really feel bad for them. Now, what's going to happen to Alec Murdaugh? Unfortunately, Alec Murdaugh will not be able to attend the funeral. If they make contingencies to attend the funeral, every inmate and their brother is going to be very upset. So what happens is that when you have a family member pass away in prison, you will be called to the pastoral team. You will go to their office. They will inform you of the death in the family. You will be given 2 phone calls. They're usually not limited in time. After that, they will sequester you in another cell, just kind of off to the side, away from everybody, or you may sit in the chapel. And then once you have gotten yourself together and you're prepared to return back to general population, usually a couple hours, you will do so. That's it. That's kind of where we are on that. And it'll be interesting to see what or how it hits the news as far as what the prison guards and people report. No matter who you are, no matter what you've done, losing a parent is very difficult. So prayers go out to the entire families, not necessarily out to just Jack Murdaugh. It's her grandchildren and her children and all that. Okay, y'all, so that was Alec Murdaugh's situation right now. We're going to swoop, and it is fast. Now we're going to switch gears, and we're going to start talking about the migrant killing trial that taking center stage right now. And a lot of the headlines are saying anger or fear. Attorneys in migrant killing trial make case around defendants' motives. So, what is this? George Kelly. His name is George Allen Kelly. He has been accused of being an angry and aggressive man against smugglers, and he was out to frighten and kill anybody, but the defense paints a totally different side. So I'm going to kind of go through what has happened thus far. I wonder if I can get the trial up. Let me see. Because there's some things I really wanted to hit on. I don't want to watch his recap. Well, this is when I wish I had a mod and an assistant that can help me through this. It's easier to have somebody else helping you pull things up and click things around. Okay, so the 2 days ago, 2 days ago. Who was the first and what was the second? Okay, 7 hours, we're going to do this one. I am going to try and share screen with volume. Share audio, share. We're going to go do this and see if it works. I don't know if it's going to work, because I should be able to exit out. Nope, that's not working. I have a new program, guys, and it is not the easiest thing to figure out. It is not the easiest thing to figure out. Let's see. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for, y'all. Ay. Well, anyway, I guess what I'll do is just go through the points today, because no one's, it is what it is. Entire screen, wonderful. Share. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. Maybe I have done it for once in my life. Dun, 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 dun. Oh my gosh, I think I just did it. I just did it. I got to remember how I did it, y'all. Okay, I'm going to kind of skirt through a lot of things. I'm going to try and get to certain bits of information, because this court case took a long time. I'm trying to get to the opening of prosecution opening statements. We're going to watch a little bit of that, and I'm hoping we can hear it. Okay, prosecution opening, here we go.
So good afternoon, everyone. We were talking about this visual that is up on the screen now, and the reason why I was showing you this visual again is I wanted to tell you that you're going to hear some testimony from 2 officers from the Department of Public Safety from the aerial photographs, and they also did something called a Leica scan of the area. And a Leica scan is a more detailed type of analysis where they take really detailed measurements so that they can do measurements of the scene that are accurate and to scale. And so this is the drone photo with the measurements, but you'll also hear from a Sergeant Captain who did the Leica scan for us as well. And then again, as I indicated, Trooper Reyna is going to testify about the drone footage. The next officers you're going to hear from are an FBI agent who assisted the detectives in downloading Mr. Kelly's cell phone. Our detectives aren't up to speed, or weren't at the time up to speed on some new cell phone data called Cellbrite. And that data, that software is what we use to download people's cell phones, so we can look at their text messages, their photos, and their phone calls, those sorts of things. And so the FBI, you'll hear from the FBI agent who assisted with that download, and you'll hear from Detective Mario Barba. He's actually the tall detective that was in that photograph you saw, so you'll meet him when he comes in to talk about those cell phone downloads. And he did something called a physical download of the defendant's cell phone. You'll learn that the defendant's cell phone was kind of an older model phone, so the Cellbrite software wasn't actually able to open it because the software was old on it. And so what we actually had to do was go through the phone and physically examine and take photographs of things as opposed to the normal download we would do. And you're going to hear about some of those text messages, and they really give you some insight into what was happening with George Kelly in the weeks leading up to the homicide. And you'll see this is just sort of a flavor of those text messages, and you'll see all of them as we go through the testimony from Detective Barba and Agent Douglas. And this is kind of the flavor. He's sending texts to his friend a couple of weeks before the homicide saying, "Overrun with drug cartel, AK getting a lot of work. Pic of drug runner carpet tracks," and one of the CBP agents will explain what carpet tracks are to you. Those are essentially booties that migrants use to try to cover their sign as they're walking through the desert. And they call them carpet.
Your Honor, can we have a conference briefly?
Okay, yeah, she's disagreeing with something they're saying. I'm gonna just get to the point of what she's talking about, because I'll be honest with you guys, I don't want to sit here and rewatch the whole thing. But she's getting ready to go through some bullet points, and I'm just skimming through. They're gonna go through the bullet points of their case, and I think that begins now.
To the casings that were located on the defendant's patio that we showed you, those 9 casings earlier in the photographs. He's going to talk about something called an ejection pattern for the AK-47. He's going to talk to you about, and what that means essentially is when the spent casings eject from the AK-47, what pattern do they normally land in? That's called an ejection pattern. So he'll talk to you about what the ejection pattern for this weapon is, and you'll learn why that's important from the experts as they testify. He's also going to talk to you about an examination of the victim's clothing. He's going to tell you that he didn't see any soot or any stippling. And what that tells you is that this was not a close-up shot. We know it wasn't a close-up shot. We know Mr. Kelly shot from his back patio. But this just confirms that determination. Next, you're going to hear from 2 other experts from the Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Lab, and they're both forensic scientists as well. And these 2 forensic scientists did some work essentially just to check the boxes to make sure. We don't expect that on a casing we're going to find any DNA or any fingerprints. And that's because of how hot it is inside the weapon. That just burns off any DNA or any fingerprints. But we went ahead and checked those casings anyway for fingerprints and DNA, and we didn't find any fingerprints on the casings, and we also preserved whatever was on the casings as far as DNA goes. But again, that was really just a checkbox, not really expecting to find anything. The next outside expert witness you're going to hear from is a man named Rick Wyant. And Rick Wyant is also a forensic scientist. He has his own consulting company, but he also works for a state crime lab in another state. Mr. Wyant is the shooting reconstructionist in this case. He's the ballistics expert. He's going to talk to you about the shooting reconstruction and also about something called bullet wobble. You'll see that he'll talk to you a little bit about how the...
Okay, I want to say this right now. They're talking about the gun. Let's stop there and talk about the gun for a moment. With this particular weapon, it can go 200-300 yards and still kill something. But stippling, you have to be within a certain distance. Stippling is the very, almost sometimes invisible, depending on how close it's visible. Gun blast, when the projectile comes out of the casing, the gunpowder is being forced out behind it, which is how it's worked, and that shoots. It's like you put dirt in a straw and you walk up in a wall and go like that, and it's going to go, and it's going to leave a pattern on the wall. That's stippling. That is what happens if you are close enough to somebody when a projectile is shot from a weapon. You're going to get some stippling unless you are within so many feet away. I don't know the exact distance. I would assume it would have to be at least 10 feet or more. I don't know. I tried to Google it, and I didn't get an exact answer quick enough to share this with you, and I didn't want this to be something we didn't talk about. So part of the claim is that when Mr. Kelly shot his weapon in the air, which is what he claims, the victim was about 150 yards away. I haven't heard the exact measurement. That we'll hear in court. But it was well over 100 yards away, and therefore there would be no stippling. Now, does not mean he actually shot him. I could be standing 10, 15 feet away from you and pull out a weapon and shoot you. and not leave any stippling on you. But the problem is you're going to hear in a minute, where's the bullet? Let's continue.
Shape of the entry wound is for the gunshot wound, and that there was a little bit of wobble on that, and he'll explain to you what that could be caused by. Hitting a little branch or something like that along the way, on the way that it hit Gabriel. The next expert witness you're going to hear from is Tara Telsell. And Ms. Telsell is a scientist from R.J. Lee Labs, and you'll hear that this information that she's going to provide you comes from trace examination of the victim's clothing. And this was, again, just to determine if this is a close-up shot or a far shot, and she'll explain to you what her findings are when she's here. You're also going to hear from the medical examiner from the Pima County Medical Examiner's Office that did the forensic autopsy of Gabriel in this case. And she's going to describe for you the injuries to the victim in this case. And I'm going to show you a couple of photographs from the autopsy that show you the entry and the exit wound. This is the entry wound on Gabriel's back. And
They're not going to be showing you the actual images.
Tim will explain
Good
to
camera
you
work.
all of the dimensions of the wound and what that means. And this is the exit wound on Gabriel's chest. And she'll explain to you again what all of the measurements mean and how she knows which is entry and which is exit wound. The other thing she's going to tell you is that she didn't find any stippling or any soot around the entry wound in this case. And again, that's an indication that this is not a close-up shot.
But it doesn't mean it was his
And then
gun.
finally, she's going to talk to you about the path of the projectile in this case. She's going to talk to you about how the projectile entered through these three ribs back here and essentially blew out those ribs and traveled through the ribs, through the
He was in an upward
right lung,
position
through the
through the lower rib,
through the
upper
ascending
torso.
aorta, through the sternum, through the parasternal anterior left second rib,
right here.
and then out. And she's going to give you all the details about that injury and what that means.
I overlooked this the first time I heard it. So the first time it entered in below the arm, kind of in the back, through the lungs, between ribs, blew them out, comes up, I would say at about 11 o'clock right here, comes out approximately in this upper area here. If it came from the sky, it would enter here and it would exit here. So if he shot up, the entrance one would be here and the exit one would be here. If he was bent over, for example, and someone shot him in a surprise attack from the rear, and he's bent over, that would be more of a straight plane of this. I'm sorry, that doesn't add up. If the entrance wound is lower than the exit wound, then that would not be a stray bullet, and that would not be from his gun for his testimony. I just realized that. I've been listening.
In terms of how long he might have lived, what that means with respect to how he could have responded immediately following the shooting. She'll tell you all about those details. But the one thing that I want to make sure I leave you with is that when we're talking about the evidence in this case, I want to remind you of the words of George Allen Kelly. And I want to remind you that Mr. Kelly told you, I'm not admitting to anything I've done, but all those things tend to add up. And they do add up in this case. And they add up to second-degree murder and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. All of the items of evidence point toward that. We've got the ballistics and the bullet trajectory. the medical examiner's testimony, the fact that Gabriel's body is 115 yards away from the Kelly residence, the fact.
Whoa. Sorry about that. 115 yards away. Over a football field. 73-year-old man. The type of weapon, we'll go into this later, thanks to my son. I'll pull up some information about the sighting of this weapon and how this weapon is not something that, unless you are very proficient in this weapon, that you can easily do at that distance. We'll continue.
That Kelly says that the individuals he saw were 100 to 150 yards away from his residence. The location of the location.
Okay, now we have some discrepancies already starting. The body was found. I'll write this down. Was found at 115 yards from the house. And Mr. Kelly stated he saw 5-ish persons 150 yards away. Let me tell you something, these ranchers know their yards. These ranchers know how far things are. That's a good discrepancy there.
Of the casing, the ejection pattern that you'll learn about from the experts, the information about the horse that you hear from Daniel, and that is corroborated by the defendant's conversation with Jeremy Morcell. The fact that no one heard that alleged first shot except George Allen Kelly.
He lives on a 150-acre ranch. That is nothing to hang your hat on, lady. I'm sorry.
There's no soot or stippling on the wounds, indicating this is not a close-up shot.
I'll be right back, y'all.
And Kelly admits that he shot his AK-47, and we have matched the casings by his patio to his AK-47. And Kelly admits that these people weren't coming toward his house. They weren't approaching him. They weren't any kind of threat to him. They were going parallel to his residence.
So I'll be close.
And I just mentioned the AK-47 matched the casings. And then finally, you'll have the testimony of Daniel, who will tell you what he observed that day. And all of those things will lead you to find that the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant's guilty of these charges. The state's evidence will leave you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt in this case.
Okay, what do we against our lease to church parking fees?
The defendant
Can we call him out?
has told the officer that he was conscious of the consequences of his actions, and he would take responsibility for those actions. We're going to ask you to hold him to that and to find him guilty at the end of this trial of these two charges: second-degree murder for the death of Gabriel Cuenca, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon for Daniel Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hunley. Does the defense wish to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. Can you guys hear me? These are working. Okay. If I start to get too quiet or these stop working, just wave at me. So I want to make sure we can hear what's being said here. You guys haven't heard much from me yet. My name is Brenda Larkin. I represent George Allen Kelly. And that's who I want to talk to you about today. Because the state talks a lot here today about what they say happened on January 30th of last year And I want to talk about everything that led
Yeah,
up to
gotta call
that
me.
incident so that you have an idea and you can
But
put
anyway.
that incident into
Yeah, I was
context
all like,
when you're actually
what the
hearing the
hell?
evidence. And
Bell
the
didn't
evidence
go
is
off?
going to
Nothing
describe
went
some
off?
of Mr. Kelly's background. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Kelly is born in the Carolinas. He grew up always in rural areas. He's always hunting. He's always fishing, mostly fishing.
Forget
That's
it.
his
I feel
life
bad.
ever since he's a young boy.
I've been watching that
And he
screen.
goes to
I'm
college,
live.
graduates college. He marries Wanda, who's his high school sweetheart, and they start a life together, he and his wife. Mr. Kelly works with Fish and Wildlife for a very long time. It allows him to be outdoors. It allows him to be in nature. It allows him to be close to the things that he loves and doing the things that he loves. Eventually, he and Wanda decide to move to Montana because he takes a job out there, and the trout fishing in Montana is the best in the whole world. That's why he wants to be there. He winds up working for Fish and Wildlife on an Indian reservation and working with the tribe that's out there. Eventually, the state takes over the tribal land and his job no longer exists for him out in Montana. He's offered positions in different places, but all of those positions are desk jobs in a city, which to him is just not something that he can do. So he and his wife decide to stay in Montana, and they open up a lodge. They open up an Orvis Lodge that involves taking people on guided trips to go fishing, to go hunting, and they operate that as a family.
Okay, guys, I'm just going to say this. Oh, I keep doing that. I need to be doing this. Sorry. How do I put this? I am going to shorten all the history. So basically, they live in Montana. They open up this hunting lodge and this little guided hunting, guiding, fishing property experience. And then at a certain point, he promised his wife at a certain time that he would move wherever she wanted to move as she did this for him. So eventually, they sell the place. They moved down to Arizona. They moved to Flagstaff, which still gets snow. And I think his wife was like, I'm done with snow. We're moving south. So they moved south. They buy a 150-acre ranch right next to the border of Arizona. When they first moved here, there were some illegals that were coming around and stuff, but they were in regular clothes. They were not in camouflaged. It wasn't a big deal. In fact, he would see evidence of bottles of water that had been left. He didn't want anybody being hurt on his property. So he did multiple things. One is instead of using barbed wire on all of the rows of the fence, the bottom couple of rows he used a flat wire. So if they did forcibly crawl under, they wouldn't be harmed. And then he would leave a bottle of water here and there for them. So, but at that point, there wasn't any major issues with the cartels and the drugs and the human trafficking. Most of I know I accidentally hit the wrong button. I was charging my what is it called? Mouse. So one of the biggest things is that he was at that point just wasn't happy about it, but didn't want anyone to get hurt or die. But things started turning worse. So I'm going to try and scroll up to that point.
A lot more camouflage that they're seeing now that they didn't in this territory. Mr. Kelly does not wish for a violent encounter. But he has limited Spanish now, but he knows how to tell them it's okay. And his first impression, he was confused, and the folks who were helping him build his fence tell him, "Oh, those are illegal aliens. That's what you just saw." And so he had to start learning about what that was. That was never something that he'd ever encountered before. And he describes that first encounter as very heartbreaking to him. He saw people, and he saw families, and he saw that people were hurting. He saw that people were desperate, and he saw that people were scared. And that was the first impression he had of illegals on his property. And he's building the fence. He hasn't put any wire up yet. He learns that it's likely there will be more such people who are coming across his property. And he thinks, well, I mean, that's not great, but what can I do about it? And so he purchases some smooth wire for the fence. The top strands on the fence are barbed wire. The bottom wire is smooth wire. Because he knows if people are going to be coming through, he at least doesn't want anybody to get hurt. Over the years, and again, it's many years he's on this property, over the years
He's owned that
he
ranch
sees
for
more
20-odd
things
years.
start to transpire. He doesn't see people close up very frequently. He sees people from a distance, if he sees people at all. He sees people who are family groups. And he knows they're family groups because they're people who are men, who are women, who are children, all sort of traveling together. In the early days, everybody's wearing ordinary clothing. So no different from the clothing you might see if you just walk around outside today. And in the early days, he doesn't encounter very many problems, and he doesn't feel afraid. He feels these people are actually more afraid of me than I am of them, because they run. When they see me, they get scared. He starts to pick up on as he goes out, and he goes out every day on his ranch. He's a cattle rancher. He's out there every day. He sees trails. He sees tracks. He sees different signs throughout the day, every day, of people coming through his property. He sees what he describes as campsites, meaning a place where people stay for longer, perhaps past the night. In these areas, he finds water bottles, he finds clothing, he finds discarded food items, all sorts of things just to tell him, even though I didn't see people, I know people were here because here's signs of people being here. And he learns over the years where these sites are. And over the years, as he's out on his property, if he happens to have a water bottle with him, he'll leave a water bottle at one of those sites because he doesn't want anything bad to happen to anybody on his property. He's a compassionate man, and he doesn't want people on his property, but he understands that people have their own lives and they're trying to do something out of desperation. He starts to communicate with Border Patrol. These ranches that are on the border have a program called a Ranch Liaison Program, and that program involves a person, the Ranch Liaison, whose job it is to connect with these ranchers on the border, establish rapport, establish communication with them, in order that this rancher who's out here in this vast area can have somebody to access, to talk to, whenever something happens or whenever something is seen. And so over the years, Mr. Kelly becomes familiar with a number of ranch liaisons who cycle through that position. He reports things to the ranch liaison that he sees. He's told by the ranch liaison, you know, if it's a criminal issue, you can call 911. If it's a border issue, so if there's an issue with any kind of illegal immigration on your property, call the ranch liaison. The ranch liaison also sends information to the ranchers. So if the ranch liaison is aware that there's a big group of people in a certain area, if it's near a ranch, the ranch liaison will communicate that to the rancher to say, here's a heads up, I'm letting you guys know there's this number of people in your area. Things of that nature. If Mr. Kelly were to ever see a helicopter circling his property, for example, and he doesn't know what's going on, he calls the ranch liaison because that's whose helicopter that is, and they're going to know what's going on, and they'll inform him of what's going on. So Mr. Kelly establishes this relationship and this rapport with Border Patrol over the years.
We're now doing 1.25 speed to get through this.
The response time to his property
We're not doing
is not
1.25
necessarily
speed
very
to get
fast.
through this.
So if he calls somebody, he might not get somebody out there for 15 minutes or something like that. And by that time, whoever was there is gone. Whatever he saw is no longer there. That's just the nature of reality on the ground for Mr. Kelly out there.
For those of you who are not in either Arizona or Texas, Border Patrol, I'm sorry for the noises. I thought I've had all my stuff down. Border Patrol and all of that, there is very, very difficult because I don't know what the statistics are. I'll look them up in a minute, but you've got one Border Patrol agent for many, many, many miles. So it does take, no matter whether you're in the Texas or Arizona or parts of California or New Mexico, wherever you are on the border, it is not a fast response. This is very typical.
This is all pretty fine and dandy for many, many years. And then things start to change. Mr. Kelly starts to see different things. He's not seeing as many family groups anymore. Mr. Kelly starts to see individuals carrying backpacks. Men, always men, carrying backpacks and going along the fence lines. He knows that these are individuals engaged in illegal activity because when they see him, they run away. Still, people run away from him. And then things change. And things change in a very dangerous and a very frightening way for Mr. Kelly and for his wife. Mr. Kelly starts to see larger groups, and he starts to see larger groups of all men carrying large backpacks. At first, he doesn't see any weapons, but he's seeing a difference. These aren't the same family groups that he saw when he first started living on this property. This is something else. He talks to the ranch liaison, they communicate with him. He learns that there's drugs in this area. There's human trafficking in this area. There are other things going on besides family groups coming through here. The ranch liaison communicate with Mr. Kelly eventually, and they never used to say this before, but they start to say, there's a group in your area, be careful. Don't try to stay, if while there's this group in this area, don't go out. They communicate different messages like that. It used to be you run into a group of people, it's no problem. People might be scared, they might be afraid that you'll report them or something, but this is different. Something has changed. Now there's more fear coming from Mr. Kelly and from his wife. He doesn't know anymore who he's going to run into when he's out on his property. And eventually, over the years, he has a couple encounters where he starts to see weapons. He sees, again, these groups of men carrying backpacks, and this time he'll see a rifle, maybe 2 rifles. Things start to get much more dangerous. This isn't what it used to be. On at least one occasion, somebody takes a shot at Mr. Kelly. Mr. Kelly gets fired at least one occasion. On that particular occasion, Mr. Kelly didn't have a rifle with him. He had his pistol with him, which he carried with him a lot, but he didn't have a rifle. And the person who fired the shot was so far away, his pistol would be ineffective. So Mr. Kelly dropped down into the grass, and he waited, and he hoped. He hoped that nothing further was going to happen. He stayed there for about 15 minutes before he was able to gather himself and come in. Over the years, he's reported a number of incidents to law enforcement involving either seeing people or hearing shots, being approached by people, those sorts of things. Over the years, he's made a number of reports. And typically, the report gets investigated, law enforcement comes, they take Mr. Kelly's statement, they can't find anyone because it took too long for them to get out there, people are gone anyway, and nothing happens other than he's able to record it. But because of this heightened level of danger and this heightened level of risk, Mr. Kelly starts to feel unsafe on his property. And he knows when he goes out, he needs to be armed to protect himself. He also chooses to be armed as a deterrent. He hopes that if people see him, and if they see that he's carrying a rifle, they will leave him alone. And then nothing has to happen. No encounters have to take place. Mr. Kelly does not wish for a violent encounter.
Thanks for joining.
This is some of the background coming from Mr. Kelly and his wife. You'll hear them talk about these types of things and what's going on their property. You're also going to hear from a number of different Border Patrol agents who have experience out in that property and in that general area, who know the area. Border Patrol knows what's going on out there. They know which types of people are out there and what they're...
Okay, let me give you a road thus far, Helen. Okay, first of all, are you hearing the court? Because I think I got it fixed. Awesome! It was a glitch on there, and I had to totally reinstall the whole program and do everything. But it's fixed. Yay! Okay. We've had opening arguments on both sides. Now, a quick road thus far. Prosecution tries to paint Mr. Kelly as an immigrant hater, and that he shot the immigrant, and they are bringing witnesses from Mexico. Now, get a load of this. The sheriff department from Arizona goes to Mexico. Well, back up. There was some news media coverage of the incident on Mr. Kelly's ranch. 2 people came forward and said that they saw him shoot the victim. Now let's stop for a minute and think about that. You are with the party of people that was illegally on this man's property. You saw him shoot this person and you supposedly ran, leaving the person to die. This person you claim was a person coming into the United States to make a better life for themselves. Life was so bad for them in Mexico that they were willing to risk their life to come across the border for a better life. So you call and said you were witness to this, and so the sheriff, deputies, or investigators, we'll just call the investigators, go into Mexico. Did not communicate with the Mexican authorities that they were there to do an investigation on a murder trial. You meet with the 2 people who swear that they were there when the victim was shot. And this lady's going to get into all this, but I'm trying to give you a heads up. You have forensics that's coming on board. The victim was shot in the lower ribs on the right side. The wound exited here. That's an upward projectile. That's a this-way shot. Mr. Kelly states that he shot roughly 9 shots up in the air with his AK. If that's the case and he's reckless shooting of the weapon, which means the bullet would have had to have entered here and exited here, unless the man was upside down, hanging upside down in a tree. So that's an inconsistency. Helen, if you want to listen, we've got not too much longer for the defense, but pay attention because they are also saying that he kept changing the story, would not say that the person was shot on the 911 call. He called it an animal. He called it everything but. The lady on the 911 call was saying, I need to know what's going on so I know what I'm sending my sheriffs into. Is it an animal? Is it a human? What is it? What's happened? What's so bad? What you may have heard or may not have heard that Mr. Kelly, when he bought his land and had some issues, was told if you have an immigration issue, you call your ranch liaison to the Border Patrol. They will contact Border Patrol and have Border Patrol come out. If it's a sheriff issue, they'll contact the sheriff department or 911. So that's what he did. So people are kind of hammering, why didn't he call 911? Well, he was told. Now, at this point, the person's deceased. His dog found the body. He'd been there for a little bit of time. He was already in rigor mortis. So he knew that there was no hopes of salvaging this person's life. So 911 and an ambulance and EMTs would not have made a difference. So he was basically send the coroner. But he finally got to the point that he said, do me a favor. I don't know why this is dinging. It should have been a do not disturb. He said, do you remember the case where there was a woman in a car and the woman was dead? Yeah, the EMS operator said, it's that without the car. He refused to say, I found a dead body. Okay, I'll back up. The wound was here, came out there. It was between the ribs, and it came out. I'm going to leave you with that right there. Sorry, bud. Okay, I'm still here. Expecting a package. So anyway, what happened is the bullet comes in from below the rib cage, towards the bottom of the ribs, and comes out through here, going that way. One shot. Prior to, hold on, I apologize. I exited. I'll take care of it. Sorry. What happened is that what started all this is that Mr. Kelly heard one shot outside. He heard a shot outside. So by his doors is AK, I want to say AR-47. His weapon is by the door. He grabs it, he goes outside. That's typical rancher behavior, don't you think? So anyway, so I don't want to share too much more because I believe his attorney is wonderful. I love the way she point by point answers everything that the prosecution said. So if you're coming on and you hadn't heard the full prosecution, that's okay. The defense is going to clarify it. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to move from here.
They're doing. And this is an area, Mr. Kelly's ranch is about 1.5 miles north, as the crow flies, from the border wall. And you're going to hear something called the end of the wall. You're going to hear that described by witnesses in this case. 1.5 miles south of Mr. Kelly's property is the international border between the United States and Mexico. And there's a wall out there, and then it ends. There's a very tall wall. It's metal. It has razor wire on top. It's pretty big and pretty imposing, pretty difficult to climb over or get around. And then it just stops. That wall just stops. And after that, there's a little barbed wire fence, and there's what are called Normandy barriers, which are sort of metal crisscross things that will stop a vehicle, but they won't stop people. And so you're going to hear that the walls can be effective in moving traffic. So traffic that might come through closer to Nogales now has to move further out and come across here where the wall ends, which is right near Mr. Kelly's property. And so this is a corridor. Mr. Kelly's property is in a corridor of illegal traffic. And you'll hear that that illegal traffic includes human smuggling and drug smuggling. You'll hear that there are different sort of jobs, I suppose, or positions involved with this illegal traffic. There are scouts and their guides, who are people who are working to facilitate both human and drug smuggling. So a scout is a person who's going to typically be stationed at a high point on a mountain with binoculars, who can survey an area visually. They're typically wearing camouflage, typically trying to conceal themselves, and they have a radio with them so that they can see where a border patrol is, they can see where a group is that might be going through for whatever reason, they can see where the pickup point is, and they can relay this information on the radio to the bad guys on the ground who are trafficking the people or trafficking the drugs through the area. You're
What's your opinion so far, Mr. Talon?
Or coyotes. But the coyotes are the guides, and those are the folks who are guiding groups of people through this area. A guide will have a radio. A guide might be listening on the radio to a scout or to somebody else. A guide will be responsible for bringing either people or people who are carrying drugs or just people to a certain location. You're also going to hear that there are other groups out there that are called either rip crews or bandits, depending on which term you prefer. But there are groups of people out there who try to take advantage of the illegal traffic that's going on. These are people who might confront somebody who's carrying drugs with weapons, steal the drugs from the person who's carrying drugs. These are people who might confront these migrant groups and rob them, because this type of crime doesn't really get reported. If somebody's a migrant and they're in here, they're very vulnerable. If the bad guys go and rob them, it's not frequent that that's reported. So this is just the general character of the type of crime that's happening in this rural area that's out east of Nogales, very near Mr. Kelly's property. You're going to hear that this traffic is controlled. This is not haphazard criminal activity. This is organized criminal activity. And there's a hierarchy of organization involved in these trafficking enterprises. And you're going to hear that everything is controlled. including illegal migration, by these higher up drug trafficking organizations. You're going to hear that nothing goes through there. No drugs, no people, no nothing, no asylum seekers, no nothing, unless there's some sort of knowledge or approval from these organizations who control this territory. As such, you're going to hear that sometimes these organizations will retaliate against a guide, let's say, for various reasons. Perhaps this guy lost a load of drugs that he was supposed to deliver. Perhaps this guy stole a load of drugs that he was supposed to deliver. Perhaps this guide talked to the wrong person, gave information to the wrong person. Perhaps this guide smuggled a little bit extra without permission. Smuggling extra without permission is not allowed either. This is all happening in the area of Mr. Kelly's ranch. This ranch is isolated, it's secluded. There are Border Patrol cameras that are out there looking at the National Forest and looking at some of the properties out there. These cameras are not regularly pointed on Mr. Kelly's property. And the smugglers who use this area, they know how to avoid the cameras, they know how to go under the radar. Smugglers in that area are largely successful at what they do. Smugglers in that area are not keen to have a lot of extra police presence in that area. They've got a good operation going through there. They don't want people coming in there and messing that up for them. Mr. Kelly's property is a good corridor because it's right there north of where the wall ends, which is where people are coming through. And it's also right on the way to a road called Duquesne Road, which goes east to west out there. And that's a good pickup location. People who move drugs and people drop things off into a vehicle takes them somewhere else. Duquesne Road is known for a lot of that sort of traffic. That's the knowledge that Border Patrol brings to the table about this area and about what's going on out there. Mr. Kelly and Wanda bring knowledge about this area as well, based on what they've seen and based on what they've done over the years. We mentioned too that Mr. Kelly and Wanda both feel less safe over time as they're on this property, as they're receiving this information, and as they're looking at more evidence. And on those campsites that I mentioned where they're finding water bottles, they're finding clothing, they're finding things like that, they're noticing differences in clothing too. They're noticing that there's a lot more camouflage that they're seeing now that they didn't used to see. They're noticing that these water bottles that people are carrying are painted black. So a plastic water bottle that's painted black to avoid reflecting off of anything, to further avoid detection. And they find carpet shoes all over their property on a pretty regular basis. Carpet shoes are, it's a cutout piece of carpet that you put on the bottom of your shoe, and then there's camouflage and Velcro that's sewn into the carpet to attach the carpet to your shoe. And they learned that these are tools that are also used by smugglers to try to avoid being tracked, because Border Patrol tracks people, and carpet shoes, hopefully for the smugglers, tend to avoid that. Carpet shoes are typically discarded when a person gets picked up, because they don't want to be found with carpet shoes later, because that looks pretty suspicious. And so you'll find groups of carpet shoes just dropped in various locations on Mr. Kelly's property at various times. And when Mr. Kelly runs into this, knows there was a group out here of somebody doing something, and they got picked up from here. Sometimes that's on his property, sometimes it's on roads near his property. It's a common occurrence for Mr. Kelly and his wife out there to have to deal with that. Things get very serious one time when Mr. Kelly is no longer on the property. Mr. Kelly leaves because he and his wife have some property up in the White Mountains. It has to be prepared before they can stay in it. A lot of things have to be de-winterized and stuff like that. But they like to go to the White Mountains in the summertime. Mr. Kelly's away at the White Mountains once when he gets a call from Wanda. And she says that something happened. She doesn't know what, but something happened. There's helicopters everywhere. She doesn't know what's going on. Mr. Kelly and Wanda eventually hear that somebody found a dead body near Mr. Kelly's property. And this is the body of a woman who's been discovered, he believes, in a car. He hears this little secondhand, third-hand knowledge, so he's not sure exactly what happened out there. But he's very concerned. And one of the neighbors tells him that this woman was possibly murdered. And he stops what he's doing, he returns, and he goes back because he doesn't want Wanda to be by herself when all of this is going on. This is the environment that he finds himself in, and this is what he and Wanda are dealing with on a regular basis. They used to feel safe on their property. They don't feel safe on their property anymore. And there's a lot of scary things that are happening around them. They've called law enforcement before, and they know that it takes time to get out there. They have a good relationship with law enforcement. Mr. Kelly continues to report things that he sees, including various cuts in his fences. Because back in the day, when you had family groups going through, they would go under the fences by the smooth wire. Not anymore. Now his fences get cut pretty regularly. And his cows will get out, and he has to walk his fences to make sure that he can repair them and things like that. So he's scared every day on his property. And he needs to arm himself every day on his property to try to deter this, to try to protect himself. It's in this context that Mr. Kelly sends text messages that the state put on your screens in front of you during their opening statement. You're going to hear about some of Mr. Kelly's text messages, and the state's going to tell you that this shows that Mr. Kelly is just amping himself up to go do something. He's really getting ready to hurt somebody. He really hates people who are crossing his property, etc. I just want to get out in front of that a little bit and give you folks the context so that when you read those messages, you can understand what Mr. Kelly is saying. In those messages, Mr. Kelly's talking to a friend of his who lives up in the White Mountains. And in those messages, Mr. Kelly is sharing his feelings with his friend. And when men get together to share their feelings, as far as I know, maybe this doesn't mean anything, but when they get together to share their feelings, they don't typically say, hey man, I'm really scared on my property. There's a lot going on. I feel this is getting out of my control. I hope and pray that nothing will happen to me or my wife, but I'm really scared. Maybe some men do that, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them will say things like, hey man, I'm in a war zone over here. Give me some support, buddy. Or, hey, guess what happened the other day? I was out there. And they tell stories. They exaggerate. They go over the top to the point of even lying and making things up. They insult each other. They use self-deprecating.
Okay. How many of us have husbands who go fishing and hunting? How many of us have had husbands say, oh, I caught one 18 inches long and it was only 8 inches long? Please understand. Now, I'm not taking sides in this. I see both sides. But, for example, we have a feral hog population issue where we live. And there are ranchers who will sit there and trap and dispose of feral hogs because they are very deadly to us. They're very dangerous to us. They will kill you. The feral hogs destroy your property. They destroy your gardens if you have them. They can harm your livestock. If you have young children and they should get pinned between a feral hog and a tree or the feral hog and its baby, that child is going to be severely harmed or murdered, killed. So feral hogs are something that you don't mess with, trust me. I've been around one. When I was young, I had to climb up a tree to get away from a feral hog and was there for a good 45 minutes before my grandpa found me. And that hog had stripped the bark from the tree trying to get to me. They are very deadly, very dangerous. And I have heard these ranchers talk about, oh, I got an 800-pound man. They can get that big. But they really exaggerate. They get so frustrated. They blow off steams. And I'm not saying that it's right and wrong when it comes to the difference between an animal and a human being. But I can understand the frustration. I was just doing some research just here in Texas alone. I just pulled up one of many information. That there was a rancher who had $60,000 in less than 1 year in damage to his ranch by illegal immigrants coming through. And the coyotes. Constantly cutting the fence, having to constantly replace and fix the fences. They have cattle, they have livestock. They get out, they lose money. They've had what they call outbuildings or little hunting buildings or shelters for the animals that the immigrants and the coyotes will use and start fires. And some of these ranches are thousands of acres, y'all. So you won't necessarily see a little fire started in the middle of the night while you're sleeping for them to cook food. And the food often is, if it's meat, is one of your chickens or your goats or one of your livestock. They have found livestock that was mutilated and partially eaten, and the rest left to just rot. There has been a lot of fear because some of it's Mexican cartel or other cartel coming through with drug runners, and they will have no issue harming you, your family, or anyone that gets in their way. The carpeted shoes. I have a picture I would love to throw up, but that means I'm going to have to exit. Stop screen share. Let me minimize this and see if I can find the carpet shoe. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. My apologies. Get out of this. Get out of this. I am still learning because the way the program works, it, let me do this. Let me move the tab over here. Google. The carpet shoes is really interesting when it comes to the smugglers because they get old pieces of carpet. Here's a picture. I am just going to share screen just quickly. Carpet shoes, share. There we go. This is what it looks like. This is a very well worn piece of carpet shoes, but it's on the bottom of his feet. Another example of that I found better is right here. Let me see if I can expand this a little bit. Shoot, it won't let me do it. But what they basically do, here's a good picture. Let me share that. Okay. So these are the carpeted shoes, and I'm so sorry. I want to expand this. Can I enlarge it? Magnify image. There we go. But it's not sharing it. Stop screen share, present, share screen, carpet shoes, carpet shoes, carpet shoes, carpet shoes. No, it won't share it. Window, entire screen. There we go. We'll share that. Okay. So this is what they look like. They're literally shoes that have carpet or foam cut out. And what it does is it makes it virtually impossible for them to, I'm going to stop screen share. Makes it virtually impossible for them to track them. And that's the interesting thing. It does. It makes it practically impossible for them to track them. So they go through these properties wearing these shoes, and when they get worn out, they just drop them. And then they just get another pair and put on. So that's some of the evidence they're talking about. And she's going into right now about the people who are the coyotes or part of the team. They have scouts. And the scouts will have camouflage backpacks, camouflage clothing of some sort. They will have a radio and a pair of binoculars. This gets very important. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to go to screen share, and I'm going to start sharing. Screen, the volume, share. And y'all, here we go.
Humor. They talk about how they're too old to run away. I can't shoot straight. That's crude. That's over-exaggerated. And that could certainly be offensive in some companies. Just a couple of guys who know each other, who have known each other for a very long time, who are trying to blow off steam because or that Mr. Kelly hates anybody. These messages do not take away from Mr. Kelly's compassionate heart. They do illustrate his fear, and they illustrate his increasing concern about what's happening. They illustrate his knowledge that he might be encountered with something dangerous. They illustrate his fear of being discovered unarmed on his property. And they illustrate his fear of possibly being confronted by armed people on his property, as he has been in the past. And then, on January 30th of 2023, Mr. Kelly is confronted with this threat. January 30th starts out a day like any other day on Mr. Kelly's ranch. He goes outside, he does his chores, he's got his animals, he's checking on them, and then he goes inside to eat lunch. It's a late lunch, it's around 2 o'clock, something like that. His wife, Wanda, is in the house, and she's playing with the cat when this happens. And Mr. Kelly's making his sandwich, and he looks up, and he sees something out of the windows in front of him. From where he's standing, and the state showed you that picture where they showed here's where the body was, here's the view that he got. Mr. Kelly's not standing on his patio when he looks up. He's standing inside his house and looking out windows. That view that the state showed you in that picture, that's impossible to see from where Mr. Kelly's standing inside of his house. You go outside on the patio, it's extremely difficult to see. Inside in the house, absolutely impossible. There's no way Mr. Kelly saw anything out there at that distance from inside his house. But he does see something from inside his house. He sees at least 5 people carrying large backpacks and carrying rifles. And they're going across his property. Window on the left, window on the right. He sees them going from left to right. He says, Wanda, be quiet. Call Jeremy Morcell. Call the ranch liaison, because he sees these people. That's the person who responds. That's the fastest person who responds to help. Wanda gets her phone. She calls the number. Mr. Kelly feels threatened when he sees these people walking across his property like this with those weapons. Mr. Kelly gets the ranch liaison on the phone. He tells the ranch liaison about what he's seeing. And then he hears a shot. He hears a shot fired. A single shot. He thinks it's the sound of a rifle shot. This happens so fast, but this single shot that he hears changes everything in his mind. He knows that something is happening outside, something violent, something dangerous. That single shot might not be the last shot fired. That might be the first of many shots that he hears. All of this processes through his mind in less than a second. Just hearing that single shot, suddenly everything is different. Suddenly, this might go very badly. Wanda's with him. She didn't hear the shot. Wanda wears hearing aids, and those were fading. And she doesn't hear noises that are happening outside like that, even when they're working to the best of their abilities. But Mr. Kelly heard that shot, and he knew that he and his wife were in danger. Time in a moment like that is really suspended, and people start acting. There's not a lot of logical thought process. There's action. Some people freeze, some people act. And Mr. Kelly acted. He took action in order to protect himself and to protect his wife. Again, he tells Wanda, call Agent Morcell. Wanda calls Agent Morcell. Mr. Kelly quickly says, I might be being shot at. I might be returning fire. I'm returning fire. Goes out. Agent Morcell describes this conversation as very quick. He says Mr. Kelly is excited. He says Mr. Kelly is obviously encountering something, because he obviously is. He's inside his house. He cannot see the location where this body is discovered from there, but he's obviously encountering something. That means there's something happening out there that has nothing to do with the location of this body. There's something else happening. Agent Morcell has now been informed. Now Border Patrol and the Sheriff's Department are hopefully on their way. Mr. Kelly knows this. He knows law enforcement's coming, but he knows how slow their response time is, and he knows that the threat that he's encountering is a threat he's encountering right now. Wanda, stay inside. He tells Wanda to stay inside. Wanda is terrified. She stands in the living room in between the windows. She doesn't even want to look outside. She's frozen. She's scared. Mr. Kelly walks outside. He picks up his rifle while he goes outside. He sees his horse running at about 100, 150 yards away, beyond 2 fences. His horse is out there, running. His horse is Sonny. Sonny is spooked. Sonny doesn't like gunshots. Sonny heard that single shot too, and he's running. He picked up on the danger too. He's an old horse. He doesn't like to run, and he doesn't do it very often, but when he's scared, he runs. Mr. Kelly wanted to just go out onto the patio with his rifle to be visible so that people could see him and they would run away. They wouldn't encounter him. That was his plan. So he walks outside the metal porch door that he goes out. It shuts with a bang. It's a loud bang. The person who's in front of the group who's leaving turns, sees Mr. Kelly, and points his rifle at Mr. Kelly. This is another one of those moments, like hearing that single shot. He sees a rifle. A rifle is pointed at him. Mr. Kelly is threatened. There are armed criminals on his property. He's already heard a shot. Maybe another shot is about to be fired, and maybe it's about to be fired at him. He believes that his life is in imminent danger. He knows that Wanda is in the house behind him. He knows her life is also in imminent danger, and he has to stop the threat. He has to stop it from happening. He makes a split-second decision. He doesn't shoot this person. He doesn't use lethal force, even though he had every right to do so. He doesn't. He raises his rifle at an angle high up so that he knows he's not going to hit anybody, and he fires. He fires until the threat is gone. He fires until these people are on their way out, and he knows that they're leaving. You heard the state talk about how Mr. Kelly's rifle had a 30-round magazine. It can be emptied in a matter of seconds. Mr. Kelly didn't empty his magazine, not even close. Mr. Kelly fired 8, 9 shots, and then he stopped. He stopped because the threat stopped. The threat was gone, and he stopped. What he did to protect himself and to protect his wife was effective. These folks run away. Wanda, she's inside the house. She can hear these shots. These shots are coming from close by. She can hear them. She freezes. She can't even look out the window. She's so scared that her husband might be out there dead. She doesn't know what happened. She doesn't know how long she stands there, afraid to look out and see what happened. She doesn't want to see his body when she looks out the window. She gets the courage eventually to look out. She doesn't see Alan. She's relieved. She sees him walking on the road towards the barn. He tells her he's okay. He says he's going to go check on his barn, and he walks in that direction to make sure that his barn is secure. He walks on his road to make sure people are gone and to make sure he and his wife are truly safe. As he does that, he has another phone call with Agent Morcell. He tells Agent Morcell that he saw these folks, and Agent Morcell asks him if Mr. Kelly was being shot at or if they were armed. Mr. Kelly says something to the effect of, "It's too far away to tell if they are all armed." Something along those lines. Agent Morcell interprets that as Mr. Kelly saying, now he doesn't say anybody is armed. Now he's changed his statement. This misunderstanding between Mr. Kelly and Agent Morcell is later used against Mr. Kelly. Unfortunately, the phone calls that Mr. Kelly has with Agent Morcell are not recorded, and so we're never going to know the exact words that Mr. Kelly used in this case. And this is the first of a very unfortunate theme in this case. The theme of words being changed, of meanings being misunderstood, of statements being twisted. And we will see this again. Agent Morcell, eventually, he sends his agents out there, the sheriff's department. They're going out there to investigate this offense, to see what's happening. They get out there and they begin to search the area. The deputies who are searching the area are themselves carrying rifles because they're told the nature of the call. There may be armed people, there may be shots fired, so they're taking precautions. The deputies walk all over Mr. Kelly's property. They fan out in this area near where Mr. Kelly said he was shooting. They spread out and they walk through it. They walk through the pasture that's out there, the yard. They go beyond Mr. Kelly's 2 fences, all the way back into where the wash is. Multiple deputies are out there searching that area. They're looking for people who might be hiding, people who might be hurt. They're looking for people who might be under trees or under bushes. They're looking in washes. They're looking for people who might be on the ground. And they don't find anybody. They don't find anybody who's injured or hiding. They don't find anybody who's dead or dying. They don't find anybody at all. They don't find any sign of the men that Mr. Kelly described or anybody else. Everybody's gone. They find Mr. Kelly, and then they briefly talk with Mr. Kelly about what happened. Deputies, a number of them, talk to Mr. Kelly. They talk to Wanda. They don't record their interactions. They don't record the conversations. So we don't know, again, exactly what is said. And here we see words that get changed. We see differences in different reports. It's very unclear what was actually said, and because nothing was recorded, we don't know what was actually said. Nobody at this point did a thorough interview with Mr. Kelly or his wife. This was brief. They were generally searching for people. They didn't find any people, and when they figured we didn't find any people, there's really not much for us to do here. We'll document the incident and we'll go home. So nobody ever sat down with either Mr. Kelly or Wanda and said, talk me through this. Let's take this one step at a time. Let's go through this slowly. While you talk, I'll ask you some clarifying questions if I have them. If I hear something that I think is wrong, I'm going to tell you, and you can tell me if I misunderstand that. Nobody ever did that at this point with Mr. Kelly or his wife, and nobody ever recorded any other interactions with Mr. Kelly or his wife out there. Law enforcement leaves. Mr. Kelly and his wife are spooked and exhausted from this incident. They're shaken, but they figure that it's over, and they're grateful that they're both unharmed. They think that's the end of it. This has already been a very long and traumatic day for the Kellys, but unfortunately, their nightmare's just beginning at this point. Later that evening, they think this is all over. Everything's over and done with. Later that evening, Mr. Kelly goes outside to check on his horse. He always brings Sonny, the horse, into the closer pastures in the evening, and this is part of his routine. He's checking on Sonny again because Sonny was very spooked during this incident, and he wants to make sure again that his horse, Sonny, is okay. Mr. Kelly's dogs, he's got 2 dogs, they go out with him. They go everywhere with him. 2 dogs are always with Mr. Kelly when he's out on his property. He goes outside and he's getting his horse taken care of and squared away for the night, and then he notices that his dogs are looking at something. His dogs are circling around something in the grass, and this is about 115 yards away from his house. This is outside of 2 separate fences. You go outside of the house onto the patio, there's a fence, there's a pasture, there's another fence. We're beyond the second fence, very far away from Mr. Kelly's house. He goes up to see what the dogs are looking at. And he approaches, and he sees the body of Gabriel Kwenbutimea. When he sees that body, he freezes. One of those moments again where time sort of stands still for Mr. Kelly. He thinks, oh my goodness, he's just discovered a body on his property. He sees his dogs sniffing and nudging the body. He notices the body seems to be stiff. And his background tells him this person might have rigor mortis of some kind. He's stiff. He notices the dogs and he sees the limbs are stiff. The sun's going down at this point. It's almost dark. He's looking at the body. He sees this is a man. He sees this man is wearing a camouflage backpack. It's not a big backpack like the group that he saw earlier. This isn't in the place where he saw the group earlier. And he notices there's a camouflage fanny pack also next to the body, hanging down, not really attached to anything. And he's remembering that single shot that he heard earlier in the day before he went outside. That single shot is coming back to him. He's in shock. He stands frozen. He's never found
Can you hear me? I apologize. Let me go over that again. Let's talk about the numbers. I'm still learning my system. In Arizona, in 2023, 775,000 immigrants crossed a 370-mile border. Let that sink in a little bit. That's 2,095 persons per mile. Now, that's not saying that's an equal. There's some areas that they don't cross because it's not safe to do so or not able to do so. So imagine having a ranch within a mile of that place, just within a mile, or even 5 miles. How many illegal crossings there are. Let that soak in. One rancher had $60,000 of damage alone. And this was I think a Texas rancher. $60,000. I know you may have a ranch that's worth $1 million, but $60,000 in damages to your property that you had to fix or repair or replace, buildings, fences, livestock. If it's your livelihood, just because the value of the ranch is $1 million doesn't mean you make $1 million. By the time you pay ranch hands and pay security and pay for this and pay for that, you may be only clearing $100,000 a year. And that's a lot of money, but think about it. One of the things that ranchers are having to do is start hiring private security for their ranches. This particular person did not have private security. He did live within, I think, a mile or so from the border. Someone said it was 100 and something yards. No, the body was found 115 yards from the house. In Texas, we've had 2.5 million encounters in 2023. 2.5 million encounters are not including the ones that got through successfully. Even if you just have half successfully got through, that's 5 million people per year. Let me do the math. 5 million people per year. If you say half get through successfully, it could be higher than that. I don't know. But that's 3,988 persons per mile in the state of Texas. Now, understand the state of Texas has a longer border. Arizona's only got 370. Texas, I think, has, gosh, I don't know, it was like 1,254 miles of border. In El Paso, Texas alone, if you know where that is, that's at the corner tip of where Texas has that little tip that comes out. They have had 1,800 a day in one day. Caught 1,800 in one day. Y'all, that's a lot of people. I'm not saying I'm for or against. I am not getting political. I am not going to get political in this in any way, shape, or form. I am not going to share what I believe. But what I will share is the actual facts. And the facts are one rancher in Texas, $60,000 a year in damages. And he's on the low end of the spectrum. Some ranchers have cattle gotten very sick because they chew on the carpet that's been glued to the bottom of the shoes, and it's made their livestock ill. There's clothing, there's empty bottles, there's also human waste all over the place. Excuse me. This is a very serious problem. And not only that, that's just talking about the immigrants trying to get in. Let's talk about the cartel. If you've never dealt with meth labs and cartel, they will kill anyone and anything that gets in their way. And that includes the rancher, the rancher's wife, the rancher's kids, They will harm the workers on the ranch. It's insane. It's insane. Safety is a huge issue. I'd rather face a rattlesnake than a coyote. Okay, let's get back with our
found a body before. He's never seen a dead person before. He doesn't know what to do, but a million thoughts are racing through his mind. He knows he fired shots earlier. He knows the body's on his property. He knows that somebody might be thinking to blame this on him. He is scared out of his mind. He's remembering again that single shot that he heard. He also knows there might be people around him. He doesn't know if he's alone. He doesn't know who else is out there. Obviously, tons of people were on his property throughout the day, and he doesn't know if anybody else is out there. He is scared. In spite of this fear, he calls for help. In spite of knowing, oh my gosh, this might come back on me, he calls for help. He does the right thing. He calls the ranch liaison because that's who he calls. That's the call that he makes whenever he's seeing something go on his property. So he calls Jeremy Morcell, Agent Morcell. He has faith that this can be investigated, law enforcement will handle this, and everything's going to be okay. That faith turns out to be very misplaced. When he calls Agent Morcell, and again, no phone call to Agent Morcell is actually recorded. Agent Morcell remembers these conversations a certain way. Mr. Kelly remembers these conversations a different way. We don't know what was actually said because we don't have a recording. But he calls Agent Morcell. He says something, this is very bad. Send the sheriff out here. Send help out here now. According to Agent Morcell, he's saying something may have been struck earlier. That's what Agent Morcell says, that Mr. Kelly says. Mr. Kelly's in shock. He's scared. He sounds serious. Agent Morcell has never heard him like this before. He says he doesn't want to talk over the phone. He still doesn't know who might be listening or who might be out there. Agent Morcell calls another Border Patrol agent. He calls an Agent Layugan, and he relays that information to Agent Layugan. Agent Layugan calls the Sheriff's Department and says something that influences very seriously the way law enforcement responds to this call. Agent Layugan, whether on purpose or by accident, but in a very big way, changes Mr. Kelly's words. Mr. Kelly, according to Agent Morcell, who spoke with Mr. Kelly, said, something may have been struck. I need you to, something may have been struck earlier. Agent Layugan takes that, and he says to the dispatcher, the homeowner's reporting, I may have struck something. He said, I may have struck something. Not what Mr. Kelly said. Makes a big difference, though. Makes all the difference, possibly. This is the first, not the last, example of words being changed. This monumental statement goes to the dispatcher with the Sheriff's Department. This is the person who's responsible for telling the deputies who are going out there, responsible for telling them, here's what you're going to see, here's what you're going to encounter, this is the call that came in. So when she gets on the radio to tell the deputies to go out there, she's saying, you know, the homeowner says he may have shot someone. Now it's not may have struck someone, it's he may have shot someone. That's what the homeowner said, I may have shot someone. Not what Mr. Kelly said. That's what law enforcement hears when they're on their way to answer this call. And that affects the way the deputies approach this call when they get out there. The deputies are viewing this case one way and one way only. And this is their first step in the investigation. This big change influences and establishes the bias in the investigation against Mr. Kelly. The dispatch then calls Mr. Kelly to talk to him. You heard that call, and you're going to hear that call again. Mr. Kelly is nervous and in shock, but he answers the phone and he speaks to the lady who's doing the dispatch. Mr. Kelly cannot bring himself to tell her that there's a dead person on his property. He's scared, he's in shock. He's never found a dead body before. He can't say the words. There is a dead person here. I'm looking at a dead person. That's hard. It's very, very hard. They're not coming out. It's not working. So he tries to tell her a different way, and that call reflects that. He tells her he doesn't want to get in trouble. He doesn't want to get her in trouble. He says these things. He does. He says these things. And he says these things because in that moment of shock and fear and discovery, he's thinking, they might think I did this. They might think I did this. And he's right. And his fear is reasonable. So when he makes those comments in his shock and in his fear, and somebody who's not troubled by this wouldn't make those comments. Somebody who's not troubled by this would say, I found a dead body. He's troubled by this. He's scared. He doesn't know what to do. He's rattled beyond anything. Dispatch keeps asking him questions, and he communicates to dispatch that there is a body out there. He says it in so many ways without actually using the words, because he can't use the words. But you can tell from that phone call that he's struggling, and he's trying to communicate this fact so that he can get some help. He says, there's the body of an animal, you know, as opposed to a vegetable or a mineral. You know what I'm saying. He's trying to get dispatch to acknowledge what he's saying. He's not trying to treat anybody like within an inhumane manner. He's trying to communicate the facts in the only way that he can to find the words to do so. Eventually, he references the dead woman, the woman that he and Mrs. Kelly had heard about on that trip when Mr. Kelly was in the White Mountains. He says, remember that situation. Come on, dispatcher, you're going to understand it now. Remember that situation. That's what we have here. You know, the body. Okay. Dispatch finally gets it, and he doesn't want to use this word either because he's still outside, he still doesn't know who might be around him or who might be listening. When dispatch sends out the deputies, she tells the deputies that Mr. Kelly was being evasive when he had this conversation with her. So that's another example of bias in this characterization of Mr. Kelly's words as being evasive. She could have used a different word. She could have said, he sounds scared. He sounds like he's in shock. He sounds like he's afraid to speak to me directly. He sounds hesitant to use certain words. She chose the word evasive, and she spread that characterization to the deputies who were responding to the scene. So now the deputies think, we're going to go talk to this guy who's being evasive and who says he admitted he might have shot someone. Not at all the way Mr. Kelly reported this, but that's what the deputies are thinking when they go out there. When the deputies arrive, Mr. Kelly takes them to where the body is. And you'll note he has a conversation with Deputy Lopez, who's the first one out there on the scene who talks to him. And once law enforcement is there, Mr. Kelly says, there's a person, there's a body, there's a person, he is over there. He uses that language now that he knows there's somebody else who's there on the scene. The deputies that get there can see that there's a single gunshot wound, a single shot going through the side of the body and coming out through the chest.
All right, sorry to interrupt you, but we do need to take an afternoon break. So we'll take the break now, take about a 15-minute break. I know some of you wanted to see the jury commissioner, Juan Pablo Guzman, maybe about related to work and what you have to submit. So I'm seeing if you can come up now and talk to you during this break.
Okay, y'all, we're going to talk for a quick hot minute about this. I am really shocked they took a break in the middle of her testimony, which to me is a little bit... Anyway, I don't agree with taking a break in the middle of a opening statement, but I understand they've kind of gone long on both sides. But I will say that interesting so far. I would love to hear some comments. Please like, subscribe. I appreciate that, and comment. I've been doing a little bit of research, and I want to kind of tell you what I found. Like I said, I have been really, really interesting. Oops, why is that not turning? There we go. It has been a little interesting in some of the research I've been doing while I've been listening to the case. I have already heard all this, so I kind of know what's going on. I told you in El Paso alone, they had 1,800 people in one day that they had encounters with. In January of this year, on the Texas border alone, they've had 124,222 encounters, and 459,118 individuals across the board have applied for entry. That's a lot. So, through the end of February 2024, over 357,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans have arrived lawfully and were granted parole under the process. Successfully, 75,000 Cubans, 144,000 Haitians, 64,000 Nicaraguans, 92,000 Venezuelans were vetted and authorized for travel. Over 74,000 Cubans, 138,000 Haitians, 58,000 Nicaraguans, and 86,000 Venezuelans have arrived lawfully and granted. Just to let you know, just where everybody's coming from and traveling in from. But the biggest issue is the illegals. In January, since May of 12th of 23 to January 31st of 24, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, has removed or returned 520,000 individuals, vast majority of them who crossed the southwestern border, including more than 87,000 individual family members. The majority of all individuals encountered at the southwest border over the past 3 years have been removed and returned or expelled. A lot of them were criminals. Once again, I don't have a personal viewpoint that I'm going to share about this. I'm reading the facts, and that's all that we're talking about. So let's talk a little bit about the victim now that this has come out in her opening statement. The victim was found face down with a radio. I don't know if she's got into this yet or not. She probably is if she hasn't already. They were able to eventually open the phone. The phone was a very old analog, not digital. So they had to do it old school. And they got pictures and the photos of the victim, many of which had the same clothes on, had the same camouflage backpack, the same fanny pack that he wore crossbody. This is vitally important. He also had binoculars in some of the photos, and he always had a radio. When the body was found, he had the same backpack, face down, but the crossbody was not across his body. It looked like it was just fallen off of his body. Somebody had gone through that fanny pack, and he had a radio and his cell phone. So, what the defense is basically implying is, or alleging is that the first shot that was heard by Mr. Kelly is what killed the victim. Now, let's go back and recall in the opening statements of both sides that one point during the day after the first call was made, and he said, I shot up in the air 8 or 9 times, or whatever it was. The authorities came out and they walked his entire property. Entire property. They did not find this victim. Didn't find him. They found no one. They didn't see anyone. They didn't find anyone, and they left. Sometime later, the dog, and he's outside. He has his dogs, and one of the dogs finds the body. He'd been there for some time. There's no bullet. The bullet went through and through. The prosecution has a, how do I put it, an entire scenario or visual from the window of the home with the patio, with the pergola, with the pile of woods, with the grove of trees, with a fence and another fence, and then the body. 73-year-old man with the style of weapon that's being used. The gun sights you've got to line it up in an odd way. My son was so wonderful. He is a mature adult, by the way. Educated me on that particular weapon last night. And that particular weapon sights do not line up like a handgun sight. I will say that. I may pull it up later and show you. But for you to be able to pinpoint that person, which is this big, that far away, and hit him in the back and it angles up, comes out here, low back between the bottom ribs, comes through the heart of the lungs, the sternum, and comes out approximately in this area. That person had to been bending practically over, like you drop something, you bend over, you drop something, you bend over to get it. Maybe the backpack, maybe the fanny pack, maybe you took it off to get something and you shoot him. That is the only angle. I wish I had an anatomy doll. I'm going to go get me an anatomy doll. And you shoot him from that angle like this, it would work. But if you shoot a weapon up in the air and the bullet's coming down, it's going to enter here and exit here. There's just a lot of inconsistencies. Then they have witnesses whose stories aren't matching at all. You have one witness states that they were west of a particular city. The ranch is west when it's actually east. He's adamant it's west. And then at some point, the interpreter changes it. Are you sure it's not to the east? And then says it's east. Not the witness, the interpreter. And by the way, I know a lot about interpreting laws. I went to college and got a degree as a deaf support specialist in interpreting in ASL. I worked for a while with a company that provided interpreters of many languages, not just ASL. I know the code of ethics and I know how it works. If that interpreter changed, because the recording, you can hear the guy says west, which is whatever in Spanish, and the interpreter says east, that's illegal. And by the way, this interview happened in Mexico, not in the U.S. And it not only happened in Mexico, but they went in and did not get any permission from the authorities to interview these people. They met them in a hotel room. And the family of the victim daughters were there, and they were both pregnant. It was not a private, secured interview. So I'm going to be interesting to see what happens on the witness stand. Just right now, if I had to try this right now, I would have a hard time because there's a lot of inconsistencies between both sides. My biggest issue is I own weapons. I have grown up around them. I have a funny story when about a snake on a trot line. The water moccasin on a trot line. Trot line is a line that's stationed between 2 points with hooks running off of it that you catch fish in a lake. But I understand you shoot up, it comes down. That's gravity. Everybody understands that. So how this victim was shot in the rib cage and it comes out at an upward angle, I don't know. That's just from the description. I haven't seen the footage. I haven't seen any diagrams, so I don't know. The other things that gets me is that one of the witnesses states that he saw Mr. Kelly standing over the body really short time after the shooting. Well, let's think about that, y'all. 63-year-old rancher, ridden a lot of horses, I'm sure, and looking at him in court, would have to go 115 yards very fast, running, and scale and jump over 2 barbed wire fences. The smooth wire is only on the bottom, not the top. That is just not going to happen. He'd have to be an athlete for that to happen and have no wounds from jumping and hopping over those fences. I have in emergencies, there was a car wreck. I was the first person on scene, hence first responder. And there was no way I was going to scale the fence. The vehicle literally flipped and rolled end over end, side over side, and was literally over a fence. Didn't knock the fence down. It flipped over the fence. They were going over 90 miles an hour when they had the accident. So No one deceased, but a lot of injuries. But the point is there was no way on God's green earth I was going to go over that fence. I snipped it. Always had a pair of those, the universal tools. I cut, and I always had wire cutters in my emergency bag. I mean, I have a lot of things. I cut the fence to get through. There's no way, as a first responder, volunteer firefighter, that I was going to scale that fence and not be harmed. So, and it took me probably 3 to 5 minutes to get to them from my car. And it was a distance. It was about 50 yards that I had to go to get to them. But I had to cut the fence to get through. If I harm myself, I'm no good to them. So I just could not imagine a 73-year-old man scaling 2 barbed wire fences. Just ain't going to happen. Okay. We only got about 20 minutes, 30 minutes left of this. I'm setting this up because tomorrow morning is court. We're going to have our first witnesses, so I hope you join me. So let's get going. And let me see if I can...
They're not interested in other follow-up to find out what's happening here. No, they don't care. They've got their guy. They're not interested in other possibilities. Shortly after that, that's Miguel. Shortly after Miguel, you have Ramon. Ramon shows up. Ramon is picked up in, I believe, Sonoita for alien smuggling. He's trafficking people through somewhere, and Border Patrol picks him up. And after he gets arrested, he says, "Hey, I was there. They take a statement from Ramon. They talk to him. Ramon says some things that are concerning. He says he recognizes Mr. Kelly from the news. He says, "I saw this on the news." And that's...
You're arrested. You say you see it on the news. You were there. You're going to say anything and everything you can, hope to get your situation in a better light, giving them something in trade. I wouldn't trust this guy.
And I recognize him because I saw him on the news. I was there. He makes some more statements that contradict objective physical evidence in the case. Many such statements that contradict objective physical evidence in the case. Many such statements that are verifiably false based on what law enforcement knows about the scene and about what took place. Does law enforcement pursue that? Do they challenge Ramon? Do they consider Ramon to be a possible suspect? Do they ask questions about why now not one person but 2 people have come forward to say, "Mr. Kelly did it, he's the bad guy," and those statements don't match up with anything and they seem to be false statements? Is that a concern for law enforcement? No, they have their guy. They don't need to worry about investigating other things. So we get Miguel, we get Ramon, then we get Daniel. Daniel comes forward in a very controlled manner. This is controlled by Gabriel's family and controlled by a supposed family member who goes by the name of Juan Carlos Rodriguez. That person somehow communicates with the sheriff's department, and that person says, "Okay, we found someone. We have someone who was with Gabriel when he died. It's this guy, it's Daniel." Okay. So the family arranges for Daniel to come talk to law enforcement about what happened. And then we have another strange thing occur in this case. The Sheriff Hathaway himself personally decides to get involved in this case. And Sheriff Hathaway himself personally, as part of this investigation, goes into Mexico to conduct this criminal investigation. And he goes in there, the evidence is going to show twice. First time to just meet with the family members, but he goes into Mexico to do that and doesn't document that meeting until much, much later, after he's told, "You didn't document this, you got to document this." And then he goes with another detective. So Sheriff Hathaway goes himself personally with a detective, Barba. They travel into Mexico to have this criminal investigation, to conduct this criminal investigation. The evidence is going to show that there's no legal authority for the sheriff to do that. The evidence is going to show that Sheriff Hathaway did not go through any diplomatic channels in order to conduct an investigation in Mexico. He didn't liaise with any Mexican official, didn't do anything. He just went into Mexico to meet with the witness, at a hotel across the line. He went with Detective Barb, as I mentioned. Gabriel has 2 adult daughters who were present at the meeting. This Juan Carlos Rodriguez person was there. They're all in this interview with Daniel. That interview takes about 45 minutes. They talk to Daniel. They don't record that interview. After the interview is finished, Sheriff Hathaway records a summary of the interview. So he gets the witness to essentially say again, tell us again what you just told this detective, but now we're going to record you. That recording lasts 6 minutes. So that's the documentation that they did of the interview that took place in Mexico with Daniel. After that interview, Daniel provides numerous other interviews, and Daniel testifies in a preliminary hearing in this case. Over the course of these numerous interviews, it becomes clear that DRR, Daniel, I'm used to using his initials, Daniel, he continuously changes and adjusts his story. And it's also very apparent that Daniel is handled by whoever's interviewing him very differently from how Mr. Kelly was handled. If Daniel says something that's verifiably false, for example, he gets an opportunity to explain it. He gets an opportunity to clarify. And inevitably, if he is caught in an outright lie, which does happen, he'll claim that he just misunderstood the question. That's what he does. The evidence will show that he makes many claims that are in fact verifiably false, and that his claims are never challenged. He's always given the benefit of the doubt. Daniel's claims are contradicted by numerous other pieces of evidence in this case that I want you to watch out for while you're hearing this evidence. He's contradicted by other witness statements, so Miguel and Ramon tend to contradict him, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Kelly. He contradicts his own claims by changing what he says over time, and his claims are contradicted by the physical evidence in the case. I'm not going to go into every single inconsistency that Daniel has now. While you're listening to him testify, I want you to ask yourself, how does what he says actually match up with the physical evidence in this case? And the evidence is going to show that his statements do not match up. The evidence is going to show that it's in fact impossible to believe that Daniel was present when Gabriel was shot. For example, right off the bat, Daniel says all of this happened west of Nogales. Mr. Kelly's property is east of Nogales. Daniel's asked numerous times, where did this happen? East or west of Nogales? West. Not possible. Daniel states that after he was shot, Gabriel fell over backwards and landed on his side or on his back after he was shot. Also, not possible. Body's found on the stomach. So if DRR is telling the truth and he fell over backwards, then after Gabriel was shot, his body was turned over. And that changes everything too. It's not possible to believe what Daniel says. Daniel also says that right after the shooting took place, Mr. Kelly stood over Gabriel's body. That Daniel saw that. He looked back, he was close, he saw him. He saw Mr. Kelly standing right there over Gabriel's body. The evidence is going to show that that is not possible. Not only is this 115 yards away from where Mr. Kelly was when he was firing, in order for Mr. Kelly to stand over Gabriel's body, he has to climb over 2 barbed wire fences and cover that distance in a very short time at his age. That's not possible. The evidence is going to show that. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Kelly is actually seen on camera by Border Patrol in a very different area after this shooting happens. Nowhere near where Gabriel is found. Daniel also says that this shooting happened right next to the border wall. He says we were 15 meters away from the border wall. It was right there when this shooting happened. Not possible. This took place over a mile and a half as the crow flies away from the border wall. Daniel also says that a horse was shot and killed in this incident. Not just shot and killed. And he stuck with that. Shot and killed, and the horse fell down, and I saw the horse fall down. Not possible. Daniel also says that Gabriel was not wearing a 2-way radio. He says, I was there, I was with Gabriel, he was just a migrant looking for the American dream, he was not wearing a radio. Not possible. Gabriel was wearing a radio. Daniel will also say that he and Gabriel, right before the shooting happened, they were right next to a road. And he got specific. He said it's the road that Border Patrol uses to get to the end of the wall. It's the road that goes to the end of the wall. Not possible. There is a road that Border Patrol uses. There is a road that goes to the end of the wall. It's not on Mr. Kelly's property. It's further away. So not possible. There are many, many of these examples, but we'll wait to see what Daniel actually has to say. The biggest three examples of these impossible statements are that the horse was shot and killed, that Mr. Kelly stood over Gabriel's body, and that this happened right next to the border wall. Those are huge. Those are not explainable by any conclusion other than Daniel wasn't there. Daniel did not witness this at all. There are other instances of Daniel misrepresenting things to law enforcement or changing his story as time goes on. At first, when he meets up with Sheriff Hathaway and Detective Barba, he says that Gabriel was the smuggler. Gabriel was leading the group. Later, he changed his story. No, Gabriel wasn't the smuggler. He just wanted the American dream. It was this other guy. I don't know his name. El Cholo. It was El Cholo. He was leading the group. That's what Daniel says. During an investigation where Daniel is talking to the detectives at the county attorney's office, they ask Daniel, have you ever transported drugs into the United States? Important question. I mean, see what this guy's background is. Have you ever transported drugs into the United States? Daniel says, no, never. I've never done that. Well, turns out he has. That was not true. He lied about that in this investigation. The defense's investigation revealed that Daniel had been convicted in federal court of transporting marijuana into the United States. He took a plea in federal court under oath where he admitted that he transported drugs into the United States. And he did some time in federal prison as a result of that offense. When he was confronted with this information later, I just misunderstood the question. I thought when you asked me, have I ever transported drugs into the United States, I thought what you meant was, did I have any drugs with me when I was with Gabriel? Does that go challenged? No. No, that explanation is perfectly accepted by law enforcement. Daniel also stated under oath that he had not met with anybody to talk about this case until he was testifying about it. That was not true. When he made that statement, he had already had 2 separate meetings with law enforcement to talk about the case. And whenever he's questioned about any of these statements, he just says, I misunderstood the question. I didn't get it. I didn't understand what you were saying. And law enforcement just accepts those explanations. Nobody from law enforcement ever doubted or questioned Daniel's story. Daniel's statements in this investigation were always accepted as fact, and they were never subjected to any kind of meaningful scrutiny. In fact, maybe you won't be surprised by this, but law enforcement changed Daniel's statements. They changed his words to make those words fit into their story. Daniel did an interview with a detective at the county attorney's office, and the detective was translating what Daniel said to the prosecutor. He was asked in Spanish, where did this happen, east or west of Nogales? He said west. The detective who was questioning him in Spanish said, oeste, west? Daniel said yes. The detective translated that, east. He said east.
Okay, guys, that is a huge deal. And let me explain why. If you, my camera is riding just a little high. Let me bring it down. Okay, that's better. As an interpreter or translator, now I'm going to scooch her back just a hair and see what she says. Let's start this here.
Spanish said oeste, west? Daniel said yes. The detective translated that, east.
The detective translated it east. Not a person, not a professional interpreter or, ooh, that can't happen. Ooh, doggy, I'm about ready to do something I shouldn't do. Okay, so there was not a professional translator there. The detective has Spanish speaking abilities. He said west. The witness said west. He then translated it to east. That is a huge no-no, guys. Yeah, that's a huge red flag in this case because location is vital, but the consistency is not there. That witness. So what's going to happen is, I guarantee it, if this continues in the direction that she's speaking, um, it's impeachment. It's creating the reasonable doubt. So that was something that kind of got me. Okay, so it was the detective who translated it to the east.
He said east. That's a problem. This keeps happening in this investigation, and that is a problem. Never, in spite of all of this coming out, does law enforcement ever seem to question if they have the right guy. They never seem to question what is going on with this witness. I'm going to leave Daniel for a minute here, but again, I want to come back to the big three. The three things he said that are impossible to believe. A horse was shot and killed when this happened. Impossible to believe. Mr. Kelly was standing over Gabriel's body right after this happened. Impossible to believe. And this happened right next to the border wall, 15 meters away. Impossible to believe.
If a horse is shot and killed, then when the detectives and everybody came and they walked the property looking for the immigrants, don't you think they would say, what the heck happened to the horse? A horse is big. A dead horse is a big stink. You would see a dead horse. I haven't heard anything, ladies and gentlemen, about a dead horse at all when it was either the sheriff, immigration, maybe a mix, came to the property looking for the illegal immigrants, and nobody mentioned anything about a dead horse. That would be hard missed.
So keep that in mind when you're listening to this testimony, when you're evaluating this testimony. I want to talk very briefly just about the forensics that you will hear in this case. Because eventually law enforcement gets around to doing some forensic analysis of the scene. And the evidence is going to show there are some shell casings on the patio outside of Mr. Kelly's house. And the forensic evidence is going to show that there's a lot that we just can't know, we just can't prove forensically. Biggest thing is there's no bullet. And when there's no bullet, there's no proof. We can't prove that Mr. Kelly's rifle fired the shot that hit Gabriel. We can't prove it. We can't prove that his rifle did not fire the shot either. You can't prove it either way. There's nothing to hang your hat on forensically to say for sure, here's what happened or didn't happen in this case. The forensics can't prove or find out who fired the single shot, the shot that Mr. Kelly heard. Who fired that single shot that killed Gabriel? We don't know. Which direction did that shot come from? We don't know. You heard the state say that because bullet comes in here and it comes out here and he's lying on his stomach, well, it comes from the direction of the house. That's where it came from. We don't know that. We don't know how Gabriel was standing when he got hit. We don't know if he was standing when he got hit. We don't know if he took steps before he fell. We don't know if he perhaps fell over backwards, the way Daniel described it, and then was either rolled over or rolled over. We don't know any of that. There's no forensic evidence that can tell us this is how Gabriel was standing before he got shot, or even this is where he was before he got shot. We don't have that evidence. And who is Gabriel and what was Gabriel doing there? Again, there's a lot that's unknown about Gabriel, about who he is and what he was doing there. All we have is the evidence, and we look at that evidence. The witness, Daniel, says Gabriel's looking for the American dream. He's a migrant, he wants to work, and he's just traveling unarmed, doing nothing, and suddenly Mr. Kelly starts firing at him. The physical evidence tells another story. The physical evidence shows that he's carrying a radio. You're going to hear about radios. He's carrying a radio. He's carrying camouflage. His backpack and his fanny pack are camouflage. The phone, Gabriel had a phone. They examined the phone. There are some photographs of Gabriel's activity on that phone. And you're going to see photographs of Gabriel on dates that are different from January 30th. You're going to see photographs of Gabriel from prior occasions on prior dates. In those photographs, you're going to see Gabriel wearing the same clothing. Same clothing he's wearing when he dies, he's wearing on other occasions, different occasions. You're going to see him carrying a fanny pack. You're going to see him carrying it in front of him, going across his body, like that. Not down at his side, not dangling off of his backpack. He carries it across his body. Photographs will show that. The photographs are going to show Gabriel standing up high on a mountaintop somewhere. Fanny pack across his chest. Radio. He's got his radio again on that date. Binoculars. He's carrying binoculars this time too. What's he doing? I think we can make an inference about that. So, who is Gabriel and what's he doing on Mr. Kelly's property? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. And the pictures show that Gabriel is not somebody who's looking for the American dream. This is somebody who is engaged in trafficking. He's engaged in illegal activity. And I'm not talking about just coming across as an illegal alien. I'm talking about either scouting or smuggling, trafficking people, trafficking drugs. We don't know. But he's trafficking. He's involved in that world. And at the end of the day, the evidence is going to show that Gabriel is living a criminal lifestyle, and criminal lifestyles are dangerous. The evidence will show that there's one shot fired before Mr. Kelly leaves his house, and Gabriel died as a result of one shot. One shot, one bullet hole. That's what the evidence is going to show. The person responsible for firing that single shot is also the person responsible for Gabriel's death that day, and that person is not Mr. Kelly. Law enforcement had a bias going into this investigation, and they wrapped the evidence around Mr. Kelly. They decided he was guilty, and they made it work. They didn't let the evidence lead them to their conclusions. They let their predetermined conclusions lead them to their interpretations of the evidence. And this is why, at the end of this, we will be asking all of you to render a not guilty verdict in this case. We're asking that each one of you listen to each witness very carefully. You heard my co-counsel yesterday talk to you about they start with a clean slate, you take them as they are, you start with no preconceived notions, listen to what they say, compare what they say to the other evidence in the case. We're asking that you not make the same mistake law enforcement did. Don't start with the mindset that Mr. Kelly shot this person. Start with the mindset of wanting to seek the truth, of wanting to go where the evidence leads, not the other way around. And we're asking you especially to consider the physical evidence in this case. Everybody has statements. Statements need to be tested against the physical evidence. That's the most important thing, the facts. Very particularly, we want you to understand the distance from Mr. Kelly's patio to where this body was eventually located. Pay close attention to all the photographs that you see, the drone footage that you see of this property, and pay close attention to the number of obstacles that are in between where Mr. Kelly was standing and where Gabriel was eventually discovered. You're going to see pergola legs, you're going to see smokers, you're going to see many, many trees, you're going to see wood piles, you're going to see fences, you're going to see dozens and dozens of obstacles in between where Mr. Kelly was standing and where Gabriel's body was eventually discovered. And you're not going to see any of those obstacles. You're not going to see a bullet hole. You're not going to see any lead residue on any of those obstacles. The state is going to try to convince you that Mr. Kelly fired 9 shots through this field of obstacles with the intent of hitting Gabriel, who he can barely see from the patio and who he can't see from inside the house. The state is going to try to convince you that 9 shots went through this field of obstacles and left no bullet holes and no lead residue. There's a broken branch in this field of obstacles, a single broken branch. This is a pasture. This field of obstacles is in a pasture. Animals all over this place all the time. In that broken branch, again, there's no bullet hole, there's no lead residue, there's no evidence whatsoever that that branch was hit by a bullet. There's no evidence that any bullets went through this field of obstacles, let alone 9 of them. So keep the physical evidence in mind, keep the forensic evidence in mind when you're listening to witnesses tell their stories. Keep other witness statements in mind to compare with the witnesses that you're hearing, and keep the known facts of the case in mind to have in mind when you're listening to people testify. The facts that can't be disputed. Have those in mind when you're listening to the witnesses. The state, in this case, is going to ask you to speculate about motives and meanings. He sent this text message, here's what he meant, this is what he thought, this is what he felt. They're going to ask you to make subjective determinations about what certain phrases mean. They're going to ask you to make subjective determinations about what somebody feels or what somebody thinks. We're not going to ask you to do that. We're going to ask you to not speculate. We're going to ask you to rely on the facts of this case, the facts, the things that we know. And finally, before I wrap up, I just want all of you to remember, co-counsel talked about it yesterday, but remember who has the burden of proof. This table has the burden of proof. This table has to prove to you that Mr. Kelly shot Gabriel. We don't have to prove that he didn't, and we don't have to prove that he's innocent, all right? It's their job to prove that he shot Gabriel, and they can't do it. And remember why the burden of proof is the way that it is. We're asking you at the end of this trial, after hearing all this evidence, to render a not guilty verdict. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Larkin. Can we get counsel on head back for a second? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the jury, we're about to adjourn in a moment. I'm going to do something that I neglected to do right after you were sworn, but it's brief. I'm going to read you the formal charge in this case. This is the charge on what's called information. So the charge and the information is the formal statement of what the charges are against this particular defendant. The caption of the case is always a caption of the case that has the name of the case, the State of Arizona plaintiff, which is George Allen Kelly.
Hold on a minute. Did he call him a felon? Let's go back on that one. I'm going to read the captioning on that.
On what's called information. So the charge and the information is the formal statement of what the charges are against this particular defendant. The caption of the case is always a caption of the case that has the name of the case, the State of Arizona plaintiff, which is George Allen Kelly, defendant. It reads as follows. In the name and by the authority of the State of Arizona, George Allen Kelly, date of birth 1/27/1949, accused by the County Attorney of Santa Cruz County, State of Arizona, by this information filed with the clerk of the above titled court this 15th day of March 2024 of the crime committed as follows. Count 1, second-degree murder. George Allen Kelly, on or about January 30, 2023, did commit second-degree murder by causing the death of GCB without premeditation. Count 2, aggravated assault. It alleges George Allen Kelly, on or about January 30th, 2023, using a rifle, a deadly weapon or dangerous instrument, intentionally did place DRV, also known as DRR, in reasonable apprehension of imminent physical injury. All of the above, as set forth, contrary to the form, force, and effect of the statute in such cases, made and provided against the peace and dignity of the state of Arizona, signed by Ms. Kimberly J. Hunley, Chief Deputy County Attorney. All right, we're going to recess for the day. The admonition, it's a long weekend, 3 days. We're going to come back Tuesday morning. And we're going to order that you be present in the jury room Tuesday morning at 8:30 assemble. Once again, we can't do anything until you're all present, so please all be punctual.
Okay, so cut off real abruptly. Let me see if I can scroll that back. I know they read the charges. Play.
It's a long weekend, 3 days. We're going to come back Tuesday morning. And we're going to order that you be present in the jury room Tuesday morning at 8:30 assemble. Once again, we can't do anything until you're all present, so please all be punctual.
You're also charged with aggravated assault, and you're charged with theft of a firearm worth less than $2,500.
Okay. So we will be there. It's 8:30 in the morning their time, Arizona time, which means 8:30 Arizona time is what time in Texas? So if it's 8:30, I guess they're Central Standard Time, aren't they? No. So if Arizona time is 9 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock here. Okay, good. So we will go live. I'm going to go live later this evening on my Facebook channel to kind of give the rundown of this case. And we'll be sharing it live both on YouTube and Facebook starting tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me. This is going to be an interesting case. This case is also going to kind of be precedenting, just like the Crumbly case. This is, I don't know, I've not heard of somebody else being tried in this manner for this crime. So we'll see what happens. I will be going live this evening. I will be sharing some of the court documents. We'll go through some of those. We'll look at some of the information and where the road thus far on Facebook, just to get everybody caught up. So with that, y'all have an awesome day. Try to be good to each other. And I will see you later tonight on Facebook. I will see you tomorrow here. Be blessed. And until then, stay safe. Bye-bye.